So here are the most important news items this week. Ukrainian Defense Forces targeted and destroyed a Russian Center for Space Surveillance and Communications in occupied Crimea, according to Ukraine's Defense Ministry on June 28th. The ministry described the center as a crucial component of Russia's satellite communications and navigation system, although it did not provide a specific date for the strike itself. Overnight on June 23rd, multiple explosions were noted across various locations in Crimea, including the town of Yevpatoria and the village of Vitine. There have been no official comments from Ukrainian or Russian authorities regarding the incident. Following these events, satellite imagery released by Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's investigative project revealed signs of fire damage at a military site in Vitine. This location is believed to house the 40th Separate Command and Measurement Complex, which is a long-range space communications center, and it's part of the Russian Aerospace Forces. Ukraine has successfully executed numerous strikes on Russian positions in Crimea and nearby areas, which have significantly impacted the Russian Black Sea Fleet's operational capabilities. In the last 2 months, Ukrainian forces have disabled around 15 Russian air defense systems in Crimea. This is reported by the Ukrainian military on June 17th, and they've targeted around 15 radar stations and more than 10 command centers in occupied Crimea. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence's cyber specialists have launched attacks on Russian communication systems, which have led to significant disruptions in propaganda media servers in occupied Crimea and have caused traffic congestion on the Kerch Bridge. This is reported to a source by Liga.net. The cyber attacks, which began several days ago, are part of a broader campaign that initially targeted Russian internet providers on the peninsula. The specialists specifically focused on propaganda media outlets, telecom operators, and the registration and control systems of the Kerch Bridge. Additionally, there were mass phishing campaigns targeting local internet users. The attacks caused disruptions in accounting services and led to cash registers malfunctioning in stores across Kerch and Sevastopol. A significant DDoS attack targeted the website of the Kerch FM, I assume Foreign Ministry, and the servers of the telecom provider Miranda Media, which supports communication for the call center of the occupying administration in Sevastopol. The attack disrupted the operation of the contact center's primary phone number. Following the cyber disruptions, a substantial traffic jam formed on the Kerch Bridge. Within an hour, the backlog of vehicles increased sixfold, and by the next morning, around 300 cars were reported to be waiting in line to cross. Additionally, hackers from the group Cyber Resistance have successfully infiltrated the email of Alexei Zakilazminsky, a personal assistant to Dmitry Medvedev, and the deputy, who is the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council and the former president of Russia. The breach targeted Medvedev's close circle, and it occurred in early 2024, and they monitored his email for 6 months. The information obtained from the hack is partially confidential, and it's currently being used to support Ukrainian defense operations. However, Inform Napalm made some of the details public on their website. The disclosed emails reveal Medvedev's involvement, in adapting the Russian economy for wartime conditions. Among the communications, there are complaints directed to Medvedev's office from the management of the Tula cartridge plant, highlighting a decline in sales due to sanctions since 85% of their products are exports, and they've requested the government to increase their cartridge purchases. Further communication suggests that drone production in Dubna in Moscow Oblast, they want to expand that, and they want to subsidize mortgages for new workers at the plant, stuff like that. They also revealed some proposals to Putin regarding the development of a new steel works or steel grade suitable for armor at the Iron and Steel Works of Magnitogorsk. And there was some documents that showed that he had commissioned several research institutions in Russia, the Institute for Strategic Studies and Knowledge of Economics and the Higher School of Economics to focus on the Arctic. So they did a bunch of research about Russian strategy in the Arctic for Medvedev. The hacked emails also disclosed information about his visits to nuclear power sites and his supervision over a Rosatom project aimed at protecting critical information infrastructure. And lastly, they have a bunch of drafts of his upcoming speeches. I will say he seems surprisingly productive for a drunk, but I mean, outside of that. Next item. South Korean TV channel TV Chosun has reported, based on information from a South Korean government official, that North Korea might deploy significant military engineering forces to the occupied Donetsk Oblast as early as 2024. These forces are expected to aid in rebuilding infrastructure within the region. According to the report, North Korea could potentially earn up to $115 million annually from Russia for sending 3 or 4 engineering brigades to occupied Ukraine. I'll say this. This is the only source we have for this, and I think a lot of people have really run with this. We have no confirmation from the North Korean government of this. We have no confirmation from the South Korean government, and nothing from America. So I just want to stress that the only source we have is this one anonymous South Korean government official, which has been reported by this, as far as I understand, reliable or reputable Korean channel. So it feels like people are jumping the gun a bit. They're saying that the North Koreans have declared this is happening and things like that. I just want to stress, this all comes from that one source. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has remarked on the General Security Agreement, stating that there's an increasing cooperation between Russia and North Korea that needs to be addressed. And they've expressed, as far as I understand, the Pentagon expressed concerns. In other words, a journalist said, if they're doing this, what would you think about it? And they said, we're concerned about this. This is a big concern of ours. And that they suggested that the Pentagon or the U.S. spokesperson suggested that any forces that were sent by North Korea to Russia would be used as, quote, cannon fodder. So as far as I understand, that's kind of their opinion on the matter, but they're not actually confirming, the incident itself. But yeah, I just wanted to super clarify, because I felt like a lot of news agencies just reported that as North Korean government announces troops being sent, and it's just not that cut and dry. Okay, next item. This is all the aid for this week. Ukraine has received a significant financial boost with a 1.9 billion tranche from the European Union as part of the Ukraine Facility Program. This is announced by Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, and it was reported by several news agencies. The Prime Minister highlighted that the latest disbursement brings the total EU financial support to Ukraine to about 8 billion since the start of the year, and he expressed deep gratitude towards the EU and the leadership for their steadfast support. The Ukraine Facility Plan, which outlines reform commitments through 2027, was ratified by the Ukrainian Parliament on June 6th. It's in response to the substantial funding provided, and they've initiated the establishment of the Ukraine Facility Audit Board. The body has been tasked with ensuring the proper use of allocated EU funds, and they monitor for fraud, corruption, conflicts of interest, and any other irregularities. On March 20th, the European Commission disbursed the first tranche of 4.5 billion in aid to Ukraine under the facility. The Biden administration is set to provide Ukraine with a new military aid package valued at 150 million, according to a report by Reuters. The package will include Hawk air defense interceptors and 155 millimeter artillery shells, and it's expected to be officially announced on Monday. The support package will feature Hawk artillery, as I mentioned, but also a variety of other munitions and equipment tailored to meet Ukraine's defensive needs. The Hawk interceptor, which the U.S. began delivering to Ukraine in 2022, has been an enhancement to previously supplied systems. And although the system was developed in the 1950s, it's undergone several upgrades to improve its effectiveness against electronic jamming and other countermeasures. Finland is also supposedly preparing to send a new military aid package to Ukraine, and we should know more about that this week. In a collaboration aimed at enhancing Ukraine's railway infrastructure to meet EU standards, the Ukrainian Communities, Territories, and Infrastructure Development Ministry, I'm sure that's a mouthful in Ukrainian, has joined forces with Spain. This is announced following a meeting with the Spanish delegation led by the Spanish Economy, Trade, and Business Minister Carlos Cuerpo Caballero, and was reported by Ukrainian press. During the meeting, the acting Ukrainian Communities, the minister of that ministry, highlighted the similarities between Ukrainian and Spanish railway systems, particularly in track width. That's interesting, I didn't know that, which differs from European standard gauge. They expressed Ukraine's interest in Spanish assistance to develop an automatic system that allows for the changing of track width of trains while in motion. Moreover, they noted that Ukraine has already initiated the construction of a European gauge track on the Chop-Lviv route this year. And the track is part of a revamped Mediterranean corridor, which represents a significant step towards integrating the transport systems of Ukraine and Moldova with the broader European networks. So I'm sure most people know this, but like gauge, meaning the width of the tracks themselves, are a little bit different, particularly under post-Soviet countries like the Soviet Union used a different rail gauge. And this is kind of a big deal for transportation and logistics. So Ukraine has been struggling to integrate that stuff as rapidly as possible since the onset of the invasion, which I didn't know Spain had the same rail gauge, which is interesting. The Spanish minister responded positively, acknowledged promise in cooperating with Ukraine and benefits that could arise from leveraging Spanish experience in railway development. And he confirmed Spain's willingness to provide financial support and expertise for the initiative, mentioning that Spanish companies will come with ready-made solutions for the problems. And they also discussed partial direct investments in Ukraine's manufacturing industry and the development of Ukrainian seaports, as well as support for cities and regions for energy requirements and the creation of some direct business links between Ukraine and Spain. Austria's Ministry of Finance unveiled a special fund designed to bolster exports to Ukraine, and they allocated 500 million euros over the next 5 years. The initiative is in collaboration with the Export Credit Agency, or OEKB. The announcement indicated that leveraging additional resources from international financial institutions could potentially double the total funding to around $1 billion for this project. The strategic fund aims to provide around $100 million annually to support new business ventures and enable Austrian exporters to engage in reconstruction efforts across Ukraine. Priority will be given to small and medium-sized projects within the public sector that can be backed by state guarantees, and this will be part of the fund's initial phase to ensure risk diversification across supported areas. The Austrian finance minister, Magnus Brunner, emphasized the importance of the fund for critical investment. He outlined that they would facilitate essential services and infrastructure restoration, including drinking water, heating, and the transport sector, which will cover roads, bridges, and railways. Additionally, the fund will support supply agreements and investments in joint ventures for businesses, trams, and trains. Applications for the funding will be accepted by OEKB starting in mid-May, so I guess it's already begun. And in a related effort, Austria has announced this month an additional $10 million in humanitarian aid directed towards Ukraine and Moldova, which raises Austria's total state assistance to $250 million total. Now for the politics stuff this week. President Volodymyr Zelensky has traveled to Brussels to participate in a European Council meeting and to sign 3 significant security agreements, including one with the European Union. The development was shared by President Zelensky. During his visit, Zelensky plans to engage with EU visitors and member state representatives to conduct bilateral discussions and finalize security agreements. One notable agreement involves all 27 EU member states and will mark a historic commitment to providing Ukraine with extensive support, irrespective of any changes within EU institutions. Say, for example, if the president became a crazy person, like Hungary. Zelensky expressed his intent to thank European leaders for their solidarity and for affirming Ukraine's irreversible path towards European integration. And he noted that for the first time, it'll enshrine the commitment of all 27 members. The EU Council's approval of the draft security agreement happened on June 25th. Additionally, media reports from June 26 indicated that the bilateral security agreement was scheduled to be signed during the summit. That already happened. That was scheduled to happen on June 28th, which it did. President Zelensky has also signed a law aimed at reforming the Bureau of Economic Security of Ukraine, which is called the BES for short. It's an important step in fulfilling the country's commitments to the International Monetary Fund as part of their funding agreements. The legislation is available on the website if anyone wants to look at it. The deputy chairman of the financial committee of the Verkhovna Rada confirmed that the action meets the deadline set by the IMF and the Ukraine facility. The law was passed on June 20th. Legislation was developed in consultation with international partners and includes significant changes to the institution. It mandates the selection of a new commission that's headed by 6 members, and it's composed equally of international experts who will have decisive votes. The law requires mandatory recertification of all employees of the institution, and the recertification process will be carried out by a 12-member commission, split equally between appointees from the new director of the institution and the international partners. For the next 3 years, personnel commissions will be established with equal representations, and they'll oversee the integration of staff. The law also mandates compulsory psychophysiological examinations, including the use of a polygraph before any appointments are made within the BES. And this move is intended to enhance transparency and reduce corruption from within the Bureau, as it plays a critical role in restoring economic security for Ukraine. President Zelensky also signed all kinds of laws this week. A law on the use of English in Ukraine, marking a significant development in the country's linguistic policies. The new legislation designates English as the language of international communication. The explanation by a legislator specifies that job positions will require English proficiency, and they'll outline how English will be used within governmental sectors, including local governments in areas like education, culture, transport, and healthcare. The law's explanatory note emphasizes that the purpose is to formally recognize English as a key language of international communication in Ukraine, and it aims to regulate the use of English across public authorities in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, local governments, emergency services, state border crossings, and several other sectors. Ukraine's defense ministry is undertaking significant reforms within its main office for logistics, development, and support of the armed forces. This includes leadership changes and broader reorganization. The ministry's procurement policy office has initiated the formation of a new collegial body focused on overhauling logistics development for the AFU. The body's responsibilities will include reviewing and updating technical documentation and aligning logistics standards with those of NATO to ensure that they meet the current demands of modern warfare. The head of the Procurement Policy Office emphasized the urgency of the reforms, and their goal is to revise as many specifications as possible, which will enable local producers to compete in orders by the state logistics. The reorganization comes amid criticisms of previous procurement practices. For instance, a recent report by a Ukrainian media organization highlighted an issue where Ukrainian military spent 54 million hryvnia, which is around 1.3 million US dollars, on water flasks that were Chinese-made replicas, which were priced significantly higher than the actual cost. In comparison, the Ukrainian National Guard acquired similar flasks from a local manufacturer at nearly half the price. The Central Office for Development and Support of Material Supply, responsible for setting the technical specifications for procurement, in other words, they set the standard for what the state can acquire, was identified as a contributing factor to the inflated costs. The reforms are aimed at addressing the discrepancies and improving the transparency and efficiency in procurement processes, which will ultimately benefit operational capabilities and logistical support for the Ukrainian military. The State Bureau of Investigation of Ukraine is set to review the conduct of Lieutenant General Yuri Sodol during the recent Russian offensive in Kharkiv Oblast. This is reported by the Ukrainian media on June 29th. General Sodol, who served as the Joint Forces Commander and led the Hortitsia group of forces active in Kharkiv and Donetsk, was dismissed from his position on June 24th. The investigation followed a formal complaint lodged by Lieutenant Colonel Bohdan Protovich, who is a commander in the Azov Brigade. A moment. Sorry about that. In response to the complaint, President Zelensky appointed the Brigadier General Andriy Hnatov as Sodol's successor. Meanwhile, the effectiveness, sorry, I've got a little throat thing going on here. Okay. Meanwhile, the effectiveness of the Russian military strategy in Kharkiv has been questioned, with some reports indicating that their efforts have so far stalled. The State Bureau of Investigation has incorporated Protovich's complaint into an existing criminal case that examines the circumstances surrounding the Russian forces. The broader investigation aims to scrutinize the overall command decisions made by the group during the defense operations. Despite receiving a formal response from the Bureau, Protovich expressed dissatisfaction with the proceedings and voiced his concerns. He called for legal intervention and argued that military personnel should come forward with their testimonies, emphasizing the importance of holding those responsible accountable. And he thanked all those who have supported the call for transparency and accountability within the command structure. So yeah, there was a very quickly, we were kind of surprised at how quickly that happened. It's like the complaint was made, and then within, I'd say, like a week or two, this investigation was launched. The U.S. Justice Department has charged a Russian citizen, Amin Timovich-Stigal, with conspiring to engage in malicious cyber activities aimed at disrupting and destroying computer systems in Ukraine and its allies. The U.S. State Department is offering a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to Stigal's location or details about his involvement in cyber activities. Stigal was involved in hacking operations against Ukrainian government systems before 2022, and his activities expanded to target the computer systems of the United States and other countries that were supporting Ukraine after the full-scale invasion started. Attorney General Merrick Garland highlighted the severity of these actions, stating, as alleged, the defendant conspired with Russian military intelligence to launch cyber attacks. According to the U.S. Justice Department, they collaborated with a member of Russia's intelligence service to distribute malware identified as Whispergate using a U.S.-based shell company. The malware was specifically designed to obliterate computer systems and data within the Ukrainian government. And just part of the broader cyber war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. The Council of the European Union has announced a new set of restrictive measures aimed at the Belarusian economy in response to the regime's involvement in Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. The update was detailed in a press release. The sanctions include an extension of the existing export ban on dual-use and advanced goods. Additionally, the EU is imposing further export restrictions on products that could enhance Belarusian industrial capabilities, such as maritime navigation goods and technologies, as well as luxury goods. On the import side, the EU is setting stringent prohibitions against the direct or indirect importation of specific Belarusian goods, including gold, diamonds, helium, coal, and mineral products like crude oil. Weird that agricultural products aren't on there. The import bans are complemented by a new export ban on goods and technologies intended for use in oil refining and the liquefaction of natural gas, not liquefaction. The Council is also targeting services by prohibiting the provision of specific services to Belarus and related entities, including auditing, bookkeeping, tax consulting, business and management consulting, and public relations services, as well as architectural, engineering, IT consultancy, and legal advisory services. Furthermore, the EU is tightening regulations on the transport of goods by road within EU territory, specifically addressing trailers and semi-trailers, even if they're hauled by trucks registered outside of Belarus. In other words, if they come from Belarus, they'll be subject to the same scrutiny. To prevent circumvention of sanctions, they will also ban transit of Belarus of dual-use goods and technologies, as well as other items related to military and technological enhancements, or defense and security sector, as well as Belarusian industries. The measures are part of the 14th package of sanctions that the Council of the European Union approved against Russia on June 24th. And additionally, the South Korean Ministry of Industry also expanded its restrictions on exports to Russia and Belarus. They added 243 items deemed capable of military use to its controlled goods list. The update brings the total number of items to 1,402, according to Yonhap, Korean news agency. The newly added items include metal cutting equipment, components of optical devices, and various sensors. The items are generally prohibited from being shipped to Russia and Belarus. The South Korean government has, however, stated that they may consider granting specific exceptions on a case-by-case basis for business agreements that were established before the latest announcement. Seems like a weird walk back, considering they're arming your enemy, but the implementation of these new restrictions is scheduled to be completed by the end of August, following the necessary procedural steps. This move is part of a broader strategy by South Korea to adhere to international norms against the backdrop of increasing tensions with North Korea. The expansion of export controls was particularly influenced by the strategic partnership signature or signed between Moscow and Pyongyang. I don't remember the part of that agreement where they said, though, that they would make specific exceptions so that they wouldn't hurt South Korea's feelings. So I'm not sure why South Korea is doing that. Next item. Sorry, I'm just a little bit miffed at South Korea's milquetoast response to all of this. Anyways, moving on. Russian oligarch Dmitry Pumpyansky has won an appeal against the sanctions. This footage, by the way, is 12 years old. I just thought I should mention that. Has won an appeal against the sanctions imposed by the European Union within the EU General Court, which ruled in his favor. The decision announced on June 26 mandates both the removal of Pumpyansky and his wife from the EU sanctions list. The sanctions were originally enforced in response to Russia's full-scale invasion. The court, which is located in Luxembourg, also ruled that the EU Council must bear its own legal cost and reimburse Pumpyansky's legal expenses. Previously, the head of Sinara and TMK, he faced sanctions in March of 2022. The companies have been implicated in supporting Russia's military efforts, with TMK serving as a significant supplier of steel to Gazprom and Sinara operating as a major Russian investment bank for the state. Both entities have associated with furthering Russia's aggressive actions against Ukraine. The EU argued that Pumpiansky's business activities with Russian state-owned enterprises and the authorities generated substantial revenue for the Russian government, which has been involved in illegal activities. Consequently, the wife was also sanctioned due to her leadership role in a charity foundation associated with Sinara. After the sanctions were applied, Pumpiansky resigned from all his positions at the two companies, and his initial legal challenge to the sanctions was dismissed in September of 2023, with the court citing his ongoing involvement in sectors vital to Russian interests. The sanctions also extended to his son, who successfully appealed against them in November. This latest court ruling is a notable legal triumph for Pumpiansky and represents a significant moment within the broader context of EU sanctions with the ongoing geopolitical dispute resulting from the Russian invasion. I should just mention briefly, I don't know what the veracity of this is, but it was mentioned, that he's somewhat close to Putin. Like he's considered kind of within Putin's, I wouldn't say inner circle, but circle of people Putin has associated with. So I don't want to say more than that, but this was mentioned a lot in the media reports. Next item. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Sergei Shoigu, the former Russian defense minister, and Valery Gerasimov, a prominent Russian general. The warrants are related to alleged crimes which have been happening during Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine and is a significant escalation against Russian officials. The action brings the total number of ICC arrest warrants against senior Russian figures to 8 since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, including one against President Vladimir Putin himself for the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. The ICC accuses Shoigu and Gerasimov of directing attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, particularly focusing on the systemic missile strikes on Ukrainian electrical infrastructure, which started in October of 2022. The court stated there are reasonable grounds to believe that the individuals are responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Moscow has responded to the ICC's actions by dismissing them as legally irrelevant, citing that Russia does not recognize the court's jurisdiction and is not a member of the ICC. Russia has maintained that its military operations target Ukraine's energy infrastructure as legitimate military objectives and denies any intentional targeting of civilian areas. Did I mention Russia lies? Despite not being a member of the ICC, Ukraine has allowed court jurisdiction over crimes committed on its territory since November of 2013, and the issuance of these warrants has been praised by the Ukrainian government, with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasizing the importance of accountability and expressing hope that the accused will eventually face justice. Ukraine's economy is showing significant signs of recovery, with preliminary data indicating that a 6.5% increase in gross domestic product occurred for the first quarter of 2024 compared to the same period in 2023. The report comes from Ukraine's State Statistics Service and highlights a robust rebound from the severe economic downturn that resulted in a 29% decline of their GDP. The recovery began in 2023. The economy expanded by 5.3% total, and looking ahead, the International Monetary Fund has projected Ukraine's GDP growth to reach 3.2% in 2024 and accelerate to around 6.5% in 2025, despite ongoing challenges from the full-scale invasion. The positive trajectory suggests an economic recovery, which has been bolstered by ongoing domestic reforms and international support. Ukraine's largest private energy provider, DTEK, has experienced a devastating loss to its energy generating capacity, according to the CEO. They've stated that nearly 90% of their capacity has been affected. They detailed that the thermal power plants have been targeted over 180 times by Russian forces and caused damage of at least $350 million US. In response to the severe damage, they've invested around $100 million US from their own resources to repair the facilities. And they've restored some operations by sourcing spare equipment globally for installation in Ukraine. The attacks have significantly impacted Ukraine's broader energy infrastructure, prompting state-owned energy operators. So again, DTEK is the largest private. Ukrenergo is, I would say, the largest energy provider in Ukraine, but it's state-owned, to implement rolling blackouts, and these started on May 15th. The disruptions are expected to continue with lengthy daily interruptions in electricity service until the end of July, which will coincide with scheduled repairs at nuclear power plants, which have lowered their capacity. They underscored, the CEO of DTEK underscored the challenges in the restoration process and noted that repairing the thermal power plants would take years and not months due to the time required to obtain necessary equipment from manufacturers abroad. Despite the challenges, they've expressed a firm commitment to restoring all facilities and acknowledged that this will happen, quote unquote, sooner or later. He described the extent of the damage as enormous, but affirmed that restoration efforts are ongoing around the clock. The Kyiv School of Economics reported that more than 18 gigawatts of generating capacity has been lost as a result of Russian strikes and occupation. This includes losses from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is Europe's largest nuclear facility, and additional key facilities like the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant and the Dnipro one, as well as Zamiv and Tripilia thermal power plants, which were completely destroyed. Ukrainian Colonel Ruslan Barahulia, who leads the main Department of Mine Action, reported significant progress in mine clearance activities across Ukraine. According to Army Inform, over the past 2 years, the Defense Ministry has successfully cleared 30,000 square kilometers of land in an area comparable to the size of a country like Belgium or Moldova. The mine clearance effort is currently 174,000 square kilometers of Ukraine, which have been contaminated with explosives since 2022. And they highlighted that of this, about 144,000 square kilometers still remain. So they've cleared 30,000 of 174,000. In response to the urgent need for organized demining efforts, Ukraine established the Corps of Deminers in April 2022. By 2024, the Corps has expanded to include units from both Defense Ministry and the Ukrainian Armed Forces, which actively work in deoccupied territories, particularly in Mykolaiv, Kherson, and Kharkiv. The Corps is set to grow to around 5,000 specialists this year. In a related effort, a Ukrainian Navy vessel, or the Ukrainian Navy, recently neutralized a World War II era naval anchor mine discovered in the Black Sea shipping channel, which is interesting. Ukraine's arms export production saw a significant increase in the first quarter of 2024, with the growth rated at 25% compared to the same period in 2023. The monthly breakdown shows a varied pattern in growth with a strong upward trend. Despite the positive year-over-year figures, arms production experienced a decline when compared with the first quarter of 2024. I don't know, this is kind of complicated economic stuff, but the growth in arms production is supported by significant international collaboration and investment. That's the key here. The Danish government allocated 170 million to assist Ukrainian arms manufacturers, and this has been followed up by some promises from various other countries. The defense industry of Ukraine has entered into strategic partnerships. They signed a memorandum of intent to form a joint venture with American Armentum Services. Additionally, they've set up collaborations with Rheinmetall for joint armored vehicle repair and production. And they've also set up similar contracts with French defense contractors. And last section for this week is some stuff happening in Russia. The Russian forces in the occupied part of Kherson Oblast are reportedly orchestrating tours of the Ukrainian reserve Askania Nova with the aim of creating a facade of normalcy and tourism in the area. The visitors, which are drawn from Russia's Rostov Oblast and the occupied Ukrainian region of Crimea, are being brought to a location where military assets are reportedly deployed, which poses significant risks. The National Resistance Centers have, of course, criticized this and told civilians to stay clear and report any activities to the Resistance Center. Despite Russian claims on social media platforms which promote the reserve's attractions, such as its dendrological and zoological parks, there's little evidence to support the presence of any genuine tourist activity. The promotional posts claim that it's a thriving tourist destination with a vital conservation center. However, the only images shared over the past month show a handful of visitors, such as the winner of a painting contest and teenagers engaged in activities like collecting hay for animals. A former Ukrainian lawmaker turned head of the Russian occupation administration in Kherson has also participated in the promotional efforts. He released a video showcasing the wildlife of the reserve, but failed to show large numbers of tourists who he claims have visited. Saldo insists that the reserve hosted thousands of visitors since the beginning of 2024 and expects thousands more by the season's end. So I don't know. I think this is just, I mentioned Russia lies earlier. I think this is just a one weird example of a very petty lie they've decided to perpetrate. And the last item for this week, the leader of the North Caucasus region of Dagestan, Sergei Melikov, has mandated a comprehensive vetting of regional officials following a series of deadly attacks on religious sites in Makhachkala and Derbent, which resulted in the deaths of at least 21 people, including law enforcement personnel. The attacks, which occurred over the weekend, prompted serious concerns about security and governance in the region. The vetting process was announced during a session with the Legislative Assembly, and they announced that they will inspect the personal records of all those in leadership positions. This decision followed the dismissal of Mohammed Omarov, who's the head of the rural Sergo-Kalinsky district, because his sons are suspected of being among the attackers involved in the incident. The scrutiny extends to investigating whether Omarov had prior knowledge of the attacks, and the governor questioned the ability of leaders to govern if they cannot ensure the proper upbringing of their children. This inquiry affects broader concerns about the potential infiltration of extremist elements within Dagestan's political and economic elite. Russian authorities have responded to the attacks with what they described as an anti-terroristic operation. That means rounding up all the Muslims, resulting in the death of 5 assailants. Subsequent reports have suggested that the suspected gunmen and others have had connections to local elites, pro-Kremlin political parties, there you go, and state-run companies, which intensifies the worries of the state of the Kremlin about extreme penetration of their institutions by extremist organizations. Milikov's comments to the assembly highlighted the socioeconomic status of the attackers, noting that they were, quote, well off with good prospects, which raises additional questions about the motivations and affiliations behind the violent acts. As far as I understand, no organization has so far taken responsibility. ISIS, which notably takes responsibility for stuff even they don't do, has not taken responsibility for this particular incident. Experts on the region, as far as I'm familiar with, have said that there's not a lot of other big players in the area that they would like readily attribute the attack to. So this either seems like some kind of a new homegrown operation with enough credibility that it's attracting these young elites, or it is an IS attack that just hasn't been properly attributed. So that concludes my news report for this week. Sorry, it was a bit of a long one. Hopefully you got well informed. I will now turn it over to my colleague, German Aid to Ukraine, for specifically the German-related news. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will now give you a brief update on the most important news from this week regarding German aid to Ukraine. On Monday, the Ukrainian border guards made the delivery of 41 Mercedes-Benz Aerox public. Back in January, I exclusively reported that Germany had pledged 41 of these modern trucks to Ukraine, and now, after 5 months, the delivery finally took place. The head of the DPSU announced during the handover that the vehicles will significantly increase the combat capability of the border guard units. On Thursday, it became known that the first artillery shells, which were delivered to Ukraine via the STEC ammunition initiative, were 100% financed by Germany. According to the SEC Minister of Defense, a total of 50,000 155 shells were delivered in June. This is already a large share of the German contribution, as Germany has financed the procurement of 180,000 155 shells for 576 million euros. And already as the last item of this week, German arms exports to Ukraine have once again significantly increased. In the past 3 months, the German government has authorized the arms export worth almost 1.1 billion euros to Ukraine. In total, arms exports worth 4.8 billion euros have been authorized to Ukraine since the beginning of the year 2024, which represents a total share of around 65% of all German exports. Among the top 5 recipients countries, India can also be found with 153 million euros, where the German government is actively trying to secure arms exports to reduce Russia's influence in this field. This was reported by the DPR, so the German press agency, after it was able to examine the relevant Bundestag document in advance before they were published. Yeah, and that's my news segment, everything I had for this week. Over to you.